Thomas Tank, Washington had cleaned the Naval Special Warfare Training Center gym for 15 years. Invisible to the elite SEAL trainees who saw only a janitor. But when cocky trainee Jake Morrison decided to humiliate him, Master Chief Rodriguez spotted a faded Force Recon tattoo that would expose one of the military's most classified legends. The Naval Special Warfare Training Center in Coronado, California, buzzed with the controlled intensity of America's most elite warriors in training. The massive gym complex smelled of sweat, rubber mats, and the particular brand of determination that came from pushing human limits beyond ordinary comprehension. State-of-the-art equipment lined the walls while SEAL trainees, the best of the best, pushed themselves through grueling workouts that would break ordinary men. Motivational banners hung from the rafters, proclaiming the only easy day was yesterday, and other mantras that defined the SEAL ethos. In the pre-dawn darkness, fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the facility where legends were forged and tested daily. Thomas Washington arrived at the gym every morning at 0400 hours, 2 hours before the first trainees would begin their workouts. At 62, he moved with a slight limp that most attributed to age and manual labor, but his broad shoulders and calloused hands suggested a strength that went beyond janitorial work. His dark skin bore the weathering of decades under harsh conditions, and his eyes held a depth that few bothered to notice as he quietly went about his duties, known simply as Tank to the few who acknowledged him at all. He had maintained the Naval Special Warfare facilities for 15 years, with the same meticulous attention to detail that had once defined his approach to more dangerous work. His routine never varied floors mopped with military precision, equipment cleaned and inspected, every surface prepared for the warriors who would test themselves against their limits. Tank's uniform was simple custodial blues, but he wore it with the same pride that others wore dress uniforms. His only visible distinguishing mark was a faded tattoo on the left side of his neck, partially hidden by his collar, a tattoo that had once meant everything, but now served as a reminder of a life he had chosen to leave behind. Tank's deliberate invisibility had served him well for 15 years, allowing him to find peace in routine work while avoiding the memories and recognition that came with his true identity. But the newest class of SEAL trainees included individuals who mistook his quiet demeanor for weakness and his service role for inferiority. Among them was Petty Officer 3rd Class Jake Morrison, whose arrogance exceeded his accomplishments and whose need to establish dominance made him view the aging janitor as an easy target for the kind of casual cruelty that revealed character flaws, incompatible with true military leadership. The confrontation that would shatter Tank's carefully maintained anonymity began on a humid Tuesday morning when Morrison and his training squad arrived early for their workout. Morrison, struggling with the previous day's evolution and looking to reassert his status among his peers, noticed Tank methodically cleaning the pull-up bars and decided to make the janitor a target for his frustration. "Hey, old man," Morrison called out, his voice carrying the false bravado of someone trying to impress his teammates. "You missed a spot. Maybe if you spent less time moving so slow and more time actually working, this place wouldn't smell like a sewer." Tank's response was measured silence as he continued his work. Having learned long ago that engaging with hostile individuals rarely improved situations, his lack of reaction, however, only emboldened Morrison, who interpreted the silence as submission rather than the controlled discipline it actually represented. The other trainees watched with varying degrees of discomfort as Morrison continued his harassment, some laughing nervously while others looked away, unwilling to challenge their peer, but uncomfortable with his behavior toward an elderly civilian employee. Tank's approach to Morrison's harassment was informed by decades of experience with hostile situations far more dangerous than a young sailor's ego. His plan was simple: complete his duties and leave the area without escalation, maintaining the anonymity that had served him well for 15 years. He understood that Morrison's behavior stemmed from insecurity and the pressure of SEAL training, and he had no desire to add to the young man's challenges or draw attention to himself. But Morrison's need to establish dominance in front of his peers made peaceful disengagement impossible. As Tank moved to collect his cleaning supplies, Morrison deliberately kicked over the mop bucket, sending soapy water across the floor Tank had just cleaned. "Oops," Morrison said with mock innocence. "Looks like you got more work to do. Janitor. Better get to it before the real warriors need to use this space." The insult hung in the air as Tank surveyed the spilled water and calculated his options. His training had taught him to assess threats and choose responses that achieved objectives with minimal force. But it had also taught him that some confrontations were inevitable when dealing with individuals who mistook restraint for weakness. Tank's first effort to defuse the situation demonstrated the patience and wisdom that came from surviving real combat, where ego had no place and survival depended on smart decisions rather than bravado. He began cleaning up the spilled water without comment, his movements efficient and purposeful, refusing to give Morrison the reaction he was seeking. "Nothing to say, old man," Morrison pressed, moving closer with the kind of aggressive posturing that would have been immediately corrected in actual combat situations. "Maybe you're deaf as well as slow. I said this gym is for warriors, not janitors." Tank's continued silence frustrated Morrison, who had expected either confrontation or submission that would validate his superiority. Instead, Tank's calm professionalism made Morrison's behavior appear increasingly childish and inappropriate, a contrast that wasn't lost on some of the other trainees. But Morrison's next action crossed a line that would trigger consequences he couldn't have imagined. Reaching out to grab Tank's shoulder and force him to acknowledge the harassment, Morrison's movement caused Tank's collar to shift, revealing more of the faded tattoo on his neck, a tattoo that would change everything in the moments that followed. The revelation of Tank's identity began not with Morrison's harassment, but with the arrival of Master Chief Petty Officer Samuel Rodriguez, a SEAL instructor whose own legendary status was built on 3 decades of special operations across every conflict zone America had engaged in since the 1980s. Rodriguez entered the gym for his morning inspection just as Morrison's hand made contact with Tank's shoulder. "Stand down, Morrison." Rodriguez's voice cracked like a whip across the gym, carrying the authority of someone who had earned respect through actions rather than rank alone. "Get your hands off that man immediately." Morrison jerked back, startled by the intervention and confused by the intensity of Rodriguez's reaction. "Master Chief, you were just demonstrating why you might not have what it takes to wear the trident." Rodriguez interrupted, his eyes fixed not on Morrison, but on the partially visible tattoo on Tank's neck. The Master Chief's expression had shifted from anger to something approaching awe as he recognized symbols and markings that few people in the world would understand. The gym fell silent as Rodriguez slowly approached Tank, his movements careful and respectful, like someone approaching a dangerous animal or a holy relic. The change in atmosphere was palpable as trainees sensed they were witnessing something significant without understanding what it was. Rodriguez's recognition of Tank's tattoo triggered memories and connections that reached back through decades of special operations history. The faded ink showed the eagle, globe, and anchor of the Marine Corps intertwined with the distinctive skull and crossbones of force reconnaissance, but it was the additional markings, the ones that required deep insider knowledge to interpret, that told Rodriguez he was standing before a legend. "Tank Washington," Rodriguez said quietly, using the nickname with a reverence that made the trainees exchange confused glances. "Master Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Washington, Force Recon, 3 tours in Vietnam, Grenada, Panama, and if I'm reading those unit markings correctly, you were part of Operation Thunderbolt." The mention of Operation Thunderbolt caused several senior instructors who had entered the gym to stop in their tracks. The operation was so classified that its existence was known only through whispers and legends in the special operations community. A mission so dangerous and successful that it had become mythical among those who understood its significance. Tank's expression remained neutral, but Rodriguez could see the slight tension in his shoulders that confirmed his identification was correct. The janitor that Morrison had been harassing wasn't just a veteran. He was one of the most decorated Force Recon Marines in history, a man whose classified service record would humble anyone in the gym. Rodriguez's next words transformed the gym's atmosphere completely as he addressed not Tank, but the assembled trainees, his voice carrying the weight of history and respect that demanded attention. "Gentlemen, you're standing in the presence of a man who has forgotten more about special operations than most of you will ever learn. This is Master Gunnery Sergeant Washington, and if you had any idea what those ribbons he never wears represent, you'd be on your faces doing push-ups in penance for witnessing his disrespect." Morrison's face had gone pale as the implications of Rodriguez's words sank in. He had been harassing not just a veteran, but a special operations legend whose accomplishments dwarfed anything Morrison hoped to achieve in his own career. The other trainees stood frozen, processing the revelation that their janitor was actually a warrior whose service had helped define modern special operations tactics. But Tank's response surprised everyone. Instead of accepting the recognition or using it to humiliate Morrison, he simply shook his head slightly and returned to cleaning up the spilled water. "Master Chief, I'm just here to maintain the facility. The past is the past." Rodriguez's respect for Tank only increased at this display of humility, but he wasn't willing to let the moment pass without ensuring the trainees understood the magnitude of their error in judgment. The situation escalated beyond a simple revelation when Lieutenant Commander Patricia Hayes, the base executive officer, arrived for her morning inspection and found the gym in an unusual state of tension. Hayes, known for her strict adherence to protocol and her skepticism of what she called war story inflation, immediately demanded an explanation for the disruption to normal training activities. Rodriguez's explanation of Tank's identity and Morrison's harassment created an unexpected reaction from Hayes. Instead of showing appropriate respect for Tank's service, she expressed skepticism about the claims and suggested that Tank might be engaging in stolen valor by allowing people to believe he had a more significant service record than reality supported. "I find it hard to believe," Hayes said with bureaucratic certainty, "that someone with such an allegedly distinguished record would be working as a janitor. Master Chief, I think we need to verify these claims before we disrupt training any further." The suggestion that Tank was lying about his service record created a new tension in the gym as Rodriguez struggled to control his anger at Hayes's disrespect. Tank himself remained silent, but those who knew how to read body language could see the slight shift in his posture that suggested Hayes had crossed a dangerous line. Hayes's skepticism about Tank's service record triggered a chain of events that would ultimately expose more than anyone had anticipated. Her decision to launch an official investigation into Tank's background, ostensibly to protect the integrity of the base from potential stolen valor cases, revealed her fundamental misunderstanding of classified military records and the nature of Special Operations Service. "I'm going to need to see documentation," Hayes announced with the confidence of someone who believed bureaucratic authority trumped operational experience. "If Mr. Washington truly has the service record Master Chief Rodriguez claims, it should be easily verifiable through proper channels." Tank's response was quiet, but carried an edge that made several people step back unconsciously. "Commander, my service record is classified at levels you don't have access to. Some operations don't exist in files you can pull up on your computer." But Hayes interpreted Tank's response as evasion rather than fact, and her next words revealed both her ignorance and her agenda. "That's convenient. Claims of classified operations that can't be verified. I've seen this before, veterans inflating their service to gain respect or benefits they haven't earned." The accusation hung in the air like a live grenade, and the tension in the gym reached a breaking point. Rodriguez looked ready to intervene physically, while the trainees watched in stunned silence as their executive officer essentially called a man Rodriguez had identified as a legend a liar and a fraud. The crisis deepened when Tank, pushed beyond his considerable patience by Hayes's accusations, made a decision that would have far-reaching consequences. Reaching into his wallet, he pulled out a small, worn card that most people wouldn't recognize, but that caused Rodriguez to inhale sharply. "Commander Hayes," Tank said, his voice carrying the authority that comes from having commanded men in life or death situations. "This is a direct contact number for General Marcus Stone, current Commandant of the Marine Corps. He personally signed off on my retirement and my current arrangement. If you want to verify my service record, call him. Tell him Tank Washington is having his honor questioned by someone who's never heard a shot fired in anger." The challenge was delivered with the calm certainty of someone who knew exactly how the call would go. But Hayes's pride and skepticism prevented her from recognizing the danger she was walking into. She took the card with a dismissive gesture and announced she would indeed make the call, confident that it would expose Tank as a fraud. What Hayes didn't know was that her investigation into Tank's background would trigger automatic security protocols that would flag her own activities for review. Tank's file was protected by security measures that logged anyone attempting to access it, and Hayes's persistent attempts to dig into classified records would expose her own unauthorized access to sensitive information she had been selling to foreign contacts. Rodriguez watched the exchange with the expression of someone witnessing a train wreck in slow motion. He knew enough about Tank's real history to understand that Hayes had just initiated a process that would end her career and possibly her freedom. The trainees, meanwhile, stood frozen as they witnessed a confrontation between different types of military authority, one earned through service and sacrifice, the other derived from rank and position. The immediate aftermath of Hayes's departure created a moment of profound silence in the gym as everyone processed what they had witnessed. Tank stood quietly, the contact card for General Stone representing a connection to power and authority that none of them had imagined the janitor possessed. Rodriguez broke the silence with words that would define the moment for everyone present. "Gentlemen," he addressed the trainees, "you've just witnessed what real military bearing looks like. Master Gunnery Sergeant Washington could have destroyed Morrison for his disrespect. He could have used his connections to end careers. Instead, he chose to continue his duties with dignity until forced to defend his honor. Morrison, who had remained silent since Rodriguez's initial intervention, found the courage to step forward. His face showed the shame and recognition of someone who had learned a profound lesson about assumptions and respect. "Master Gunnery Sergeant Washington, I'm sorry." "I have no excuse for my behavior." Tank's response demonstrated the leadership and character that had made him legendary among those who knew his true history. "Son, you're young and you're under pressure. Learn from this. The most dangerous people in the world are often the ones who don't need to prove it. And respect everyone. You never know who's carrying what kind of experience." The hours following Hayes's departure saw a transformation in the gym's atmosphere as word spread throughout the Naval Special Warfare Training Center about the morning's revelations. Senior instructors who had heard whispers of Tank Washington's name throughout their careers arrived to pay their respects, while trainees struggled to reconcile the image of the quiet janitor with the force recon legend Rodriguez had described. Rodriguez took the opportunity to educate the trainees about the reality of Special Operations Service and the men who had pioneered the tactics they were learning. Operation Thunderbolt, he explained to the gathered trainees, was a classified rescue mission in Cambodia in 1971. 12 Marines went in to extract downed pilots from a POW camp. Only 3 came out alive, but they brought 15 pilots with them. Tank Washington led that mission and carried 2 wounded pilots 5 miles through enemy territory. The preparation for what would come next included securing the gym and establishing a protective perimeter around Tank, as Rodriguez and other senior personnel understood that Hayes's investigation would trigger responses from high levels of military command. They were right to be concerned within 2 hours. Encrypted communications began flowing through military channels as Tank's file access triggered automatic security protocols. Tank himself continued his janitorial duties with the same methodical precision he had always shown. But now, every movement was watched with respect rather than dismissal. Despite the vindication of having his identity confirmed and respected, Tank experienced moments of uncertainty about whether the exposure of his past was worth the disruption to the quiet life he had built. 15 years of anonymity had given him peace and distance from memories that still haunted his dreams, and he worried that the attention would bring back psychological wounds he had worked hard to heal. His concerns were practical as well as emotional. The janitor position had provided him with purpose and routine that helped manage the PTSD that came from decades of combat operations. The exposure of his identity might lead to opportunities he didn't want or expectations he no longer wished to meet. But the response from the trainees and instructors, the genuine respect and eagerness to learn from his experience, reminded Tank that his knowledge and experience could still serve a purpose in preparing the next generation of warriors for the challenges they would face. The climax began exactly 6 hours after Hayes made her call to General Stone's office. When a convoy of military vehicles arrived at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center with the kind of urgency typically reserved for national security emergencies. The lead vehicle bore the flags of a 4-star general, and the security detail that emerged moved with the precision of an elite protection unit. General Marcus Stone himself stepped out of the vehicle, his Marine Corps dress blue uniform immaculate despite the cross-country flight he had just taken. At 68, Stone carried himself with the bearing of someone who had earned every star through combat leadership rather than political maneuvering. His presence at the training center was unprecedented and created immediate waves throughout the command structure. But it was the expression on Stone's face, a mixture of fury and concern, that told observers this visit was not ceremonial. The general's first words were directed to the base commander, who had rushed to meet him. "Where is Master Gunnery Sergeant Washington? And who the hell has been questioning his honor?" The initial confrontation between General Stone and the base leadership revealed the complexity of the situation Hayes had created through her investigation. Her attempts to access Tank's classified files had triggered security protocols that exposed her own illegal activities, including unauthorized access to classified databases and suspicious financial transactions that suggested espionage. "Sir," the base commander reported nervously, "Lieutenant Commander Hayes initiated an investigation into Mr. Washington's background, claiming concerns about stolen valor. In the process, she attempted to access files that triggered automated security responses. NCIS has already taken her into custody." Stone's response was volcanic. Stolen valor. That woman accused Tank Washington of stolen valor. The general's voice carried through the hallways as he strode toward the gym where Tank was still working. "That man has more classified commendations than most people have regular medals. He's the reason I'm alive today." And she accused him of lying about his service. The revelation that Stone owed his life to Tank added another layer to the morning's already dramatic revelations. The confrontation between General Stone and Tank in the gym was witnessed by dozens of trainees and instructors who would carry the memory for the rest of their careers. Stone entered the gym and upon seeing Tank, did something that shocked everyone present. The Commandant of the Marine Corps, a 4-star general, came to attention and rendered a perfect salute to the janitor. "Master Gunnery Sergeant Washington," Stone said formally, "I apologize on behalf of the Marine Corps and the United States military for the disrespect you've endured today. Your service record speaks for itself, and anyone who questions your honor questions the honor of every Marine who has served." Tank's response was characteristic of the humility that had defined his post-military life. He returned the salute with precision, but then shook his head slightly. "General, I chose this life. I've found peace in simple work and anonymity. I don't need recognition or apologies." But Stone wasn't finished. "Tank, your humility is admirable, but your knowledge and experience are resources that shouldn't be wasted. These young warriors could learn from you not just tactics and techniques, but the mental resilience that kept you alive through operations that would have broken lesser men." The resolution came when Tank, after a long moment of consideration, made a decision that would transform his role at the training center. "General, if these young men want to learn, I'll teach, but I do it my way, no fanfare, no special treatment. I'm still the janitor, but maybe I can share some wisdom while I work." The arrangement that followed was unprecedented. Tank would continue his janitorial duties, but would also conduct informal training sessions for SEAL candidates, sharing the mental techniques and tactical wisdom that had made him legendary. Morrison was the first to volunteer for these sessions, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine eagerness to learn from someone he now understood to be a master of the craft. As General Stone departed, he left orders that Tank's position was to be protected and supported at the highest levels, ensuring that the quiet janitor could continue serving in his own unique way. Lieutenant Commander Hayes's arrest and subsequent court-martial for espionage sent shock waves through the naval intelligence community and validated Tank's instincts about maintaining operational security even in retirement. The investigation revealed that Hayes had been selling classified information for 3 years, and her attempt to access Tank's files had finally exposed her activities. Her 25-year sentence served as a reminder that threats to national security could come from within. Morrison's transformation from arrogant trainee to humble student became a model for others in the program. His sessions with Tank, conducted while the older man cleaned equipment or mopped floors, became legendary for their practical wisdom and psychological insights. Morrison would later credit these conversations with giving him the mental tools that helped him survive his own combat deployments. The gym at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center became known as Tank's Classroom, where janitorial work provided cover for some of the most valuable special operations training available anywhere in the world. Tank's story spread throughout the special operations community, becoming a powerful reminder about humility, service, and the danger of making assumptions based on appearance or current circumstances. His teaching methods, combining menial tasks with profound lessons about mental resilience and tactical thinking, influenced training programs across all branches of special operations. 5 years later, many of the SEALs who had learned from Tank while he cleaned their gym credited him with providing insights that saved their lives in combat. His emphasis on mental preparation, situational awareness, and the importance of humility in warfare became integral parts of advanced SEAL training. The incident also led to reforms in how the military handled classified service records and protected the identities of special operations veterans who chose anonymity in retirement. Tank's example demonstrated that true warriors often chose quiet service over public recognition, and that wisdom could come from the most unexpected sources. 10 years after the incident that exposed his identity, Tank still arrived at the gym at all 400 hours, still pushed his mop with the same precision, and still shared his wisdom with those humble enough to listen. Morrison, now a Master Chief himself, would often join Tank during these early morning hours, helping with the cleaning while continuing to learn from the Master. "You know what the most important lesson is?" Tank asked one morning, pausing in his mopping to look at Morrison. "What's that?" "Master guns. The mission never ends. It just changes shape. Yesterday, I killed enemies. Today, I build warriors. Same mission, protect America."